Hello, my name is Debbie Owl and Gator Stitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 7. Today is Thursday, April 8th, 2021. Thank you to all my returning subscribers. I have loved interacting with you in the comments and I'm glad that you're back. To all my new viewers, thank you for coming as well. I hope that you will like what you see. This is a video primarily about cross stitch, also a little bit about reading and when I'm watching and life thrown in. However, I've done a lot of cross stitching on a lot of different projects over the past 2 weeks, so I'm just going to jump straight into the cross stitching. As many of you know, I'm involved in a lot of different challenge groups through Facebook that helps drive the direction of what I'm stitching on each day or each week. However, before I get into some of the challenges, I just want to pull up a few projects that I worked on towards the end of March after my last video. So the first one that I worked on, I think many of you are familiar with this. It's Oh Joyous Day by Blackbird Designs. I pulled this out at the very end of March. I think I was trying to finish off a prompt for the magazine monthly challenge, and I can't honestly remember what letter this was for. I think it was the letter O in lion for that acrostic. So all I basically did, I only needed to put in 200 stitches. So all I did was put these sort of leaves on here. And I think I extended this line over as well. I was also looking for a green stitch because I was still playing Master Stitch through semi-stain stitchers, and so I was on green. So this is a lovely pattern. I'm really enjoying stitching on it. It's just not something that always calls me when I'm looking to fulfill a prompt. I have a question from it. I know that many of you have worked on this. One question I have in the pattern. So you have these 4 little leaves, or not, I don't want to say they're leaves, but because there's flowers that come out of them. And then you have these 2 leaves here. The way that it is charted on the pattern I have, 3 of these are the same color. This one is a different color, and then it's the same color as these 2 leaves. I put it in, and when I was stitching it, I was thinking, the flower itself is not symmetrical. Nature is not always symmetrical, and I was fine with that. But as I started looking through the pattern a little bit more and the other flowers that are on this top row, even though they're not symmetrical, the leaves tend to be the same color. And so I am thinking about ripping out, it's this one, which is not the same as these other 3. It's only about 20 stitches. It's not going to take me very long to pull it out and redo it. But I'm just curious, for those of you who have worked in this pattern or have it and are thinking about stitching on it, do you think that this was a mistake? I went to the Blackbird Design site, and I poked around on various sort of Blackbird fan pages, so to speak, and where they list mistakes in the patterns and how to correct it, and this one never came up. So does anyone know, is this an intentional design? Is this an intentional design, or is it a mistake? Regardless, I am probably going to pull it out and do it just because I do like to have sort of the matching colors. But I'm just curious if any of you have had experience with that. And this one is stitched on a 32 count even weave from Fortnite Fabrics in the colorway Moral. The other pattern, other project which I worked on that I don't have the cover photo with me, but I show this almost every video. This is Old World Map by Artecy. As I think many of you know, I have been working on the diagonal. Once I got Pattern Keeper, I made the decision to pull this out of the diagonal because I can just work so much faster doing cross country. So once I had finished off all the threads, which is why there seems to be a lot of sort of stitches here because I had parked threads that I wanted to work in. I've been working on some of the lighter colors, especially up here in the sky, trying to pull it over to give me a sort of a point of reference. So I've done mostly light colors. Some of these might be a little darker, sort of periwinkle color here, but I've just enjoyed working on it. I also, when I was doing the Master Stitch, this was also a great project because I could, easily whip, I had to do 100 stitches in each color, and if it was brown or black or green, there's some shade of all of that in here. And so I was able just to sort of plop in 100 stitches and do it. And I can do 100 stitches with Pattern Keeper on this one, especially like the blacks here, for example, are all very close together. I can do that in a half hour, 45 minutes. So that's where I am on this one. This one also happened to be my Whip Go call for April. And so my goal is to get 1,000 stitches in on it. I haven't totaled my stitches for this past week that I've been working on it, but I'm averaging between 75 and 100 stitches a day. So I probably, by a week from now, will have already met my whip go goal. However, this is my oldest project, and so I do try and put in half hours work on it every morning if I have time, just to keep it going. So that is Old World Map by Artecy. The last project I worked on, and I really wish I had finished it, but I haven't gotten there yet, is the Sense and Sensibility Stitch Along by Sapphire Mtn Handcrafts, also known as the Stitching Book Club. This is done on a 28 count even weave that Kristen from Sapphire Mtn Handcrafts dyed. It's done with DMC threads. So I had, for Crystal Academy, we had to put 200 stitches in a project with either, I think, blue or purple threads. So I put in these blue things here, 200 stitches, and I just haven't had a chance to pick this up again and work on it. It's a really lovely pattern. I have the kit, so I have the finishing materials for it. She has a tutorial on it. She, by her own admission, says this is a little bit more complicated than some of her previous finishes. I really don't sew, and so I think it will be very interesting for me to try and follow it. I've looked at some of her other tutorials, especially for projects that I haven't done of hers, just to see if this was a path I wanted to go down before I purchased the kit for this. And her tutorials have been great, whether it's how to do specific stitches or how to finish projects. She really knows how to break things down and do step by step. So I'm hoping that she will come up with a video as well. We do have printed instructions on how to finish it in the way she wants, but I'm kind of hoping that she will do a video again, because I don't think it's, you don't need a sewing machine for what she's talking about, but it is a little bit more complicated. But again, I'll just show it one more time because it is a really lovely pattern, and the way that it's finished is you've got some sort of white, it's not rickrack, but some white that goes around it, and then the finishing fabric, which is a similar blue to this, but it sort of pulls it in and it gives it a really nice effect. So I'm hoping at some point when I get this done and sort of get myself in gear, I will try to finish it according to, or do the final finishing according to Kristen's instructions. So we then hit April, and in April, in No New Starts, they have a challenge called, I think, Riff Off, which I think from the way that the admin who is managing it, Nat, she said originally comes from jazz, where musicians would start to play and then another musician would pick up and they would sort of play off of each other. But I think also everyone knows from Pitch Perfect, where they have the a cappella riff off as well. And so I think more people are familiar with that. So that is basically, Nat created this activity, which is a takeoff on that, where she gave us a theme on April 1st. That theme was laughter. And we had to find one of our whips that had the theme of laughter, and you could tie it however you want. Obviously laughter is more of a sound, so there was a lot that you could do with that. And then you had to put 200 stitches in that project, and then you had to go through another one of your projects and say, how does that link? So I will go through and show you sort of how I linked it. Some of mine are very clear. Sometimes it might be a little bit more difficult to follow my logic, but I will try to explain it. And part of the reason why I just didn't go for all of the obvious links is that I am also doing, through Semi-Stain Stitchers, their version of Go Fish, which they call Go Stitch. And every day they spin a wheel and it comes up with a letter. And if you have a project that starts with that letter, you do 200 stitches in that project. And if you don't have a project with that, you say Go Stitch, and you put 400 stitches into any project that you want. So to the extent possible, I was trying to combine those two so that I could have, for the Riff Off, the project that I was doing, the same as the project that I was working on for Semi-Stain for Go Stitch. And there's only one project per day for the Go Stitch, but for the Riff Off, it's only a 10-day activity, and it's as many projects as you can get through. There are some limitations. You can't repeat what the connection is, and you can't repeat a project until you have gone through all of your projects. So for someone like me, I'm never going to get through all 42 whips in 10 days. But for other people who are either a faster stitcher or they only have 5 or 6 projects that they're working on at any given time, that may be easier for them to meet. So on April 1st, the first letter that was spun for was the letter T, and we had the theme of laughter. So I picked up, this is Mystic Stitch Tug of War, and so obviously the T for Tug of War, and I said, this little bird pulling this little string on this big quilt, if I saw it, it would bring laughter, because it's just sort of, this little bird trying to fight with this very big quilt, and who's going to win that game of tug of war if I saw that in real life. So this is a full coverage piece, and it's something I started last year for Mania. It hasn't really caught me so much in terms of a lot of stitch, because I'm still basically on page 1 working on background. And so the whole top part, you'll get the bird and the clothespin, but there's not a lot more beyond that. So this big black thing is from some challenge groups I'm in where you're just working for stitches. And so this actually then goes on to page 2. It goes on the page below here, but I wasn't, except for the 200 stitches, I wasn't stitching for time. So I just went and did fill in up here. And so the background is basically various shades of green and black. So I just put in 200 stitches of 2 shades of green. So that is Tug of War. I finished that on April 1st. So I wanted to move to another project that also tied into that. So that, because it had a quilt, I said it had patchwork. So the next one I picked up was this Mandala Giraffe by Awesome Pattern Studio. And because I said this is a patchwork giraffe. This is also for letters of the month. This was on my list because this month, I believe we're on G and H. And so G for a giraffe. And so I wanted to have an excuse to tie this in. And that's upside down. So this is where I am now. Basically, and then also for Crystal Academy, we had a prompt where you had to stitch 200 stitches in red, orange, or yellow. So I chose orange. So basically I did this sort of orange color here, came down and did some here, and then there's another sort of paler orange that I did here as well. So this is my number 2 patchwork. And then, so that was all I did on April 1st. On April 2nd, when they spun the wheel, it actually was wild card or something like that. So it was basically stitch on any, just put 200 stitches into anything. So I decided I'm just going to link it to my next project. So I picked up Artecy High Intensity. So this is a Jaguar. And so I said a giraffe is a spotted animal. This Jaguar is a spotted animal. And so here's where I am. So I'm, basically this is the tail of the Jaguar and his hindquarters getting in. And obviously this is a lot of the jungle behind him. I slowed down a bit this day because I had imported this chart into Pattern Keeper. And so I just had to spend time sort of marking off what I had already done. It was the first time I had worked on this in Pattern Keeper. Really, I've basically only done page 1, so it wasn't a lot I had to import. But when I was looking at what I had marked on my paper copy, and because there's spots, so it's not all even. So it just took me a while to get this all in so that I could actually start the stitching. So basically, I did a little bit of the jungle, and surprisingly around the tail there is some dark gray. So I sort of just started filling in the back of the tail as well. So that is High Intensity. I then wanted to move on to another piece, which is the other one of my Whip Go goals. So I'm sorry, I'll just, so you can see here on this log, there's a little bit of moss under the Jaguar's paw. So my next linkage was moss. And I pulled out another Mystic Stitch, Oak Drive. The stuff that's hanging from the trees is called Spanish moss. This is if you live in northern Florida or Georgia or basically anywhere in the South where you have live oak trees, Spanish moss is everywhere and it hangs off and it helps give a very distinctive look. So my connection was moss to this one. And so I just put in 200 stitches, I think somewhere along here. My needle just fell off my needle minder. There we go. So this is basically, you know, it's slow going. I do not have this in Pattern Keeper. I only have a paper copy. So it's something that I love this picture, and this will probably be a decade-long project to actually get this done. But you know, baby steps, 100 stitches at a time. Once the Riff Off is over and I have a little bit more time to focus on it, if an O is called for Go Stitch, I will do that. We also, I believe in Full Coverage Fanatics this month, have the Confetti Conquistadors event where you take a piece with a lot of confetti and work on that, and that certainly is this piece. So it will get pulled out for some other events, and I'll get my 1,000 stitches in it, but probably not many more than that, simply because of how much time it does take to do this. So again, Oak Drive by Mystic Stitch. The next one I pulled out, so I think the next, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here so I can follow what I did. I think the next one, the next day for Go Stitch, they picked the letter Q. Now, a lot of people have Quakers and Quaker, whatever it was, Quaker Autumn, Quaker Christmas. A lot of people have Qs. I do not have any Quakers that I'm working on right now, so I couldn't use that letter, so I had to do a wild card. So the one I pulled out was A Year at Hawkhorn Hollow, and I had to put in 400 stitches because of the penalty. So the linkage I used was a very simple one. I said tree. There's several trees in all of this, but I just wanted to, I just wanted something simple, and so I can stitch. You'll see where I am. I'm in the house, so I can actually stitch pretty quickly on this one. So here's where I am now. Here is the April block. I've done the January. I've moved down to the April block. I also picked this up again yesterday because we had the letter Y was spun, so A Year at Hawkhorn Hollow. I put in about 600 stitches in this since the last time you saw it. Mostly in the house. I think I also did the tree trunk and finished off some of the tree trunk. This tree is not done. Did some of the fence because I had a dangling black thread, probably extended the black border down. So that's where I am right now. I've also, for Magical Stitches, we had to stitch on something that had a project that had something that had 5 letters. So I chose the word house. You didn't even have to stitch on that item, but this just seemed to be the simplest thing. So I'm about halfway done with meeting that prompt. I will pull this out over the weekend and finish it. It's, again, not a very hard stitch. It's just, this is a 36 count Picture This Plus Heartland, and I am doing 2/2, so that means I need to be in good lighting just to make sure that I'm hitting my holes correctly. So it's something that if I'm watching TV, we don't have a lot of natural light in our TV room, so I need to do it when I'm not watching TV with my husband. So that's A Year at Hawkhorn Hollow. And then I moved on to find a connection. I moved on to my next connection, was, I said, the night sky. So in the December block, they have, the night sky with Santa going. So I pulled out Midnight Vigil, Heaven and Earth Designs, artwork by Lisa Parker, because you can see through the window, the cat is looking at the night sky. I also, in Supernatural Stitches, needed something with a flame, and the candle obviously is a flame or a fire. So here's where I am now. I basically just did more work in the curtains. I was filling in some of the stitches here and pulling them down as far as possible, which is why you also see some of the confetti over here, but I ran out of colors here. Again, this is a really quick stitch. It's not a quick stitch according to Haid. It's a mini, but you know, when you're working on some really, really large projects, this one seems to go much more quickly. It's an 18 count aida, and so it's a breeze to stitch on, and there's not, while there's some confetti stitching, it's not hard to do. Obviously I'm in the curtain, so it's sort of just everything goes down, and this one is in Pattern Keeper. So that's where I am on Midnight Vigil. My next connection then was moon. So you can see there's a crescent moon in this picture. And I moved on to White Owl by Artecy, and obviously there's a full moon in this picture. This was another one I have a PDF of it, and so but I had not worked on it in Pattern Keeper yet. So I had to spend quite a bit of time marking off what I had already done. Also, the letter for this day, I believe it was you, and I don't have any projects but give with you, so I had to put in penalty stitches on this one. So here's where I am now. It's probably really hard to see because much of what I did was there are a lot of these sort of pale colors in the wings. I extended it down, maybe a little bit of the blue fill in here, but they tended to be more of the ninja stitches that I had missed the first time when I was doing it, when I didn't have it in Pattern Keeper, and so I was doing some of the fill in there. But I'm really enjoying this project. Blue is my favorite color, especially these sort of deep royal blues. So this one is a pleasure to stitch on it whenever I pull it out. So I haven't had many opportunities to pull it out because of the prompts that I've been working on, but it's still, when I do, I always just love stitching on it. And once I got into Pattern Keeper, the 400 stitches went by very, very quickly. I then had the next one I wanted to link it to, which was Wise Old Owl. So I think you all probably can guess that the linkage I had was owl. This is a Just Nan project. It's a really small one. So here's where I am. I basically just did last time I had done this, and I don't think I've shown this here. Somehow I finished, or not finished, but I had done some of the stitching in one eye, but not the other. So he was very, very crooked. So his eyes are balanced now, and obviously his sides are not that balanced, but I was able to pull some of the colors down there as well. Basically, I just need to finish, you know, the eyes and a little bit more on his sides, and then his body will be done, and his nose. There's some acorns and greenery on the bottom, as well as the words in the middle, and it's basically the words, I think many of you are familiar with this. A wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard, or learned. Why can't we be like that wise old bird? So I think it's kind of appropriate for the times that we live in right now. And this was when I started last year. I just pulled from my stash this linen. It is quite old. It probably is about 20 years old, and it's not a hand dyed or over dyed or anything like that. It's a 25 count, and the color is tea, but it's not tea dyed. It's just that's the name of it, and I don't know who made it, or you know what brand it is. I just had it in a baggie, a handwritten note that said 25 count linen tea. So that's where I am on that one. The next day, the next letter was F, and so I had to make a connection between Wise Old Owl and a project that I had that began with F. So I pulled out Fabulous Women in History. This is by Clouds Factory. I believe it was a stitch along 4 or 5 years ago. I did not purchase it as a stitch along. I just purchased the completed pattern several years after it was done. I had seen someone stitching on it. I believe Julie, Kansas City girl in Colorado World, and she's finished it. She finished it a year or two ago, and I loved it. And so I bought the pattern and I started working on it. So my connection between this and Wise Old Owl was that, as the pattern says, the owl is wise, and there are a lot of really wise women in this pattern. You can take your pick, whether it's Eleanor Roosevelt or Madame Curie, and plenty of people. So I just said they were wise. So I'm still very early stages on this. This was a Mania start last year. I've got Cleopatra done, and this is going to be Joan of Arc. This is a 28 count, 28 count linen. Picture this plus. Zephyr is the color, and it's an opalescent. I'm not sure it's really showing up as an opalescent here. And it's not, it shouldn't be hard to stitch on. I don't have problems seeing the holes, but for some reason, this horse and I have not been friends. And I've had, and it's not even that I've miscounted the holes. I've just added rows or things have been off, and I've had to pull out that parts of that white several times. There's things that I've fudged in there. And so I finally just said, after about 100 stitches in, and I wasn't even working on the white except that I had to pull stuff out and redo it. So I managed to get the red in, a lot of the red in here. And then the armor from Joan of Arc, there's sort of a gray here. It's kind of hard to see. And then I was at that point, I'm like, how long have I been working on this? And I have, 120 stitches. So I just came down here for the little nameplate, and that's almost 80 stitches right there. So I just threw the nameplate in and then did a little bit more just so I could get my 200 stitches. I do love this. My frustrations are my own. So I think it's one of those. I do have one of my Whip Go goals to work more on this. That will be to complete 2 figures. It's also a great piece for challenge pieces simply because there are so many objects in there and I can do lots of things. So anyhow, this is Fabulous Woman by Clouds Factory. And then the next thing, the next day, the letter A was spun. And so I have a number of patterns that start with A, but I was having a really hard time, surprisingly, linking them to Fabulous Women. So I sort of went for a little, maybe it will be accepted, maybe it won't, but I ended up picking up Apple Sampler. So it's here, and my connection was grass. So because there's like a strip of green here, which is supposed to be the grass under that tree. There is also, under the women there is some grass under some of the women there. So I said the connection was grass. And I think I've said this before, but I've taken out the row of apples here. They don't do much for me. So basically what I did on this one was I just, this past time, I just pulled up this border. This is very quick stitching on the border. It's very repetitive. It's not hard. It's a pattern. So I just pulled up a little bit more here. But then I got into, in this flower and this flower, I did all the back stitching there. Theoretically, I'm supposed to put in some French knots as well. We'll see if I ever get around to that. But there's, for the stamen in the flowers, there's little French knots in them. I then went and just put a few more colors into these apples here so I could get my 200 stitches. So this is Apple Sampler by, it's an old issue of Cross Stitch and Country Crafts. It's from the 1990s. So after I finished that, I said, okay, the next thing, my link, so you can see there's an apple pie here. So I said, well, that's dessert. And so I linked it to Little Cake Shop, Heaven and Earth Designs, artwork by Aimee Stewart. And so I said, Cake Shop has cake. That's also dessert. I think that's a pretty good linkage. I also, I have linked this to Supernatural Stitches. I can't remember exactly what my linkage was, but there was some, I think, it was to work on your largest project. And this by far is my largest project. I think it's about 350,000 stitches total. So here, and then also for Crystal Academy, we had to do 200 stitches in pink thread. So like, this is the first thing that comes to my mind. You've seen this before. Basically, all I have done on it is I pulled down some more of these stripes on the wallpaper. So at some point, and it's again, this is very easy stitching. I think one evening after dinner, I got in 300 stitches and I wasn't even trying very hard. And usually I stop stitching around 8 o'clock in the evening. So it moves very quickly. Now granted, it's a lot of block stitching, but this is the max color. So even in these stripes, there are multiple colors in each of these. So this I'm doing on a 22 count hardanger in the colorway Ivory. And I'm doing 1/1 on this. So then I linked that because there's striped wallpaper in that, and I said, okay, I have another Heaven and Earth Designs. This is Cats in the Toy Box by artwork by Lesley Anne Ivory. And you can see it also has striped wallpaper. And this is also for full coverage fanatics. My focus piece for the year, I'm trying to get a minimum of 21,000 stitches in it. And it's also, I use it for stitching on cabins in magical stitches. So here's where I am now. I think I did not show this in my last video, but basically most of what I've been working on is on this ragdoll, and she is now almost complete. This is her hat, and this is almost everything in her is confetti stitching, so it takes quite a while to get work done on her. You know, so I've done quite a bit on her hat and her hair, and then on her face. I also, when I really am tired of doing confetti stitches, down here there has been some solid chunks of color, so occasionally I will pull down. For example, here I did a bit on this. This is one of the kitties' heads. So it just sort of gives me something to do when I'm tired and I'm like, how long have I been working on something and I only put in 30 stitches with that color? Boom, I can knock out another 50 stitches really quickly with in some of this area down here. I don't try to do that that often, simply because that's going to run out at some point, and then it will be all confetti, and that makes it hard. But you can see I've done that part as well. And the top of this basket is the halfway point. So I'm over halfway done with the first row of the top parts of the pages. This is a pleasure to work on, even if with all the confetti stitching. I've just really love this pattern and really enjoy working on it. So after that, I connected it to, I have so many patterns with cats, but I decided for Supernatural Stitches, one of the prompts was to stitch on something with candy or Halloween theme, so I wanted to make sure I could pull out my Halloween design. So I just went with a very easy connection of cat. So this is it's called Ghostly Greetings, and it says have a spooktacular Halloween. So I pulled this out and put a couple hundred stitches into it. So here's where I am now. Basically, I had a vision that I could get the cat done. There was very little I had left to do on the cat. I just had to put a few black stitches in his tail. His ears, like in the ears, the inside of the ears needed some dark gray. He does need back stitching. So I said, well, I'll just do the colors around the cat, and then that way I can get all of that done. Well, 200 stitches later, fighting with Krynic, because the purple is it's a blending filament. So I'm using one strand of DMC and one strand of blending filament. Not my favorite floss to use. So I put in the yellow and basically got it to the point that the next time I pick this up, I can just quickly do the back stitch on that cat. So I don't know when the next time I will pick this up will be. It's a cute pattern, but it's not one that always calls to me all the time. But it is great if I need something that has, if I have a prompt that calls for Halloween or for candy, because there are some candy corns in this pattern, or if it calls for a metallic thread because of the blending filament, and then also the part in the middle is also done with a Krynic braid. So that is all I have that I can show you that I've done of my stitching. For today, my plans are, so the letter that was called for today was H, and that also then brings me to my second piece for letters of the month, which is his eye is on the sparrow. This was one that I think I kitted up last year, but I just never got around to starting it. So very quickly at the end of the year, when I knew I was doing no new starts, I put in 200 stitches, and I haven't picked this up again. I love it every time I see it. This and Consider the Lilies, I think they're absolutely beautiful. I just never, it should have a lot of prompts in there, and I don't know why this one, maybe because it's not necessarily my active whip pile, that I don't pull it out as often as I should. So I'm glad to have an excuse to get 500 stitches in on it. For those of you who haven't seen the pattern, you can see that here. And my linkage, and this is sort of a leap, but I'm saying Ghostly Greetings has words and this has words, and that's my linking of the motifs. And I also, because I really wanted to get the H and my letters of the month 500 stitches, I'm also for Magical Stitches going to use this we have to combine 2 creatures and make a new animal. I haven't entirely decided, but I'm thinking a peacock and a cat, so to have like a peacat, because peacocks and cats think they're the most beautiful animals in the world, so why not just create a really vain creature? And I say this as a crazy cat lady. I love cats, but they're all about look at me, and could you imagine if they had a tail of feathers that could really just really make it you look at them even more. So I will have to get 500 stitches in this by the end of the weekend. So that's my first plan. I will then, there's Adam and Eve in there, and I will link that to my Mirabilia. This is Portrait of Veronica. This is a woman. And one of the reasons why I'm so keen to get this one in there is for no new starts on the Riff Off. If there are certain items that if the pattern has that, you get bonus points. And there's probably a list of 20 items. The only one that I had that had any of them was a green dress. So obviously Portrait of Veronica. She's wearing a green dress. This is where I am. I'm still working on the skin 1/1. Every time I show her, I say that, and I feel like I'm going to be saying it for the rest of the year. She's got a lot of skin because she's got a low cut sleeveless dress. So she's got her arms. I've done her face, but I still need to work on her chest. I do love this pattern. It's just a question of plugging away and working on it. But I'm determined to get my bonus points for stitching on a project with a green dress. So that is all the stitching I have to share with you. I will say the only real question I had from my video last time was someone was asking me about Pattern Keeper. I am relatively new to using Pattern Keeper. I sort of dragged my feet for a long time. I've been stitching for 30 years. I learned how to stitch with paper patterns, and that's just the way I always stitched. But I've seen enough people on Flosstube just talk about how Pattern Keeper has really improved the speed of their stitching, and I thought, okay, let me try it. I tend, when I stitch, if I'm not watching TV, I tend to be watching Flosstube, and I have been watching them on my tablet, which meant that which is Microsoft Pro, and that meant that I couldn't really have Pattern Keeper and watch Flosstube at the same time. But we finally, I think I mentioned before, we put a TV in this room. That's a 10-year-old TV, so doesn't have the best resolution. I mean, it is an HD TV, but it's it's a little bit old, and it's been moved around quite a bit. But nonetheless, we finally put a Fire Stick on, which means it has a Wi-Fi connection now, so I can watch Flosstube that way. Question: if anyone knows how to increase the speed on a TV for YouTube, let me know. I know how to do it on my tablet, but I don't see that option when I do it on the TV. And so sometimes it feels like people who are enunciating very clearly, it's probably something I need to work on, but nonetheless, just because I was watching it at 1.5 for so long, when they're going at normal speed, it feels really, really slow. So if anyone knows how to do that, let me know. But I said, okay, now I can get Pattern Keeper on my Microsoft Pro. The problem was that when I started to go download it, and it started to say, well, do you have some memory issues? And I just, not my personal memory issues, on my tablet, and I wasn't really sure that was something I wanted to have a fight with. So I talked it over with my husband, and he's like, just buy a Samsung tablet and be done with it. So that's what I did. I deliberately bought a Samsung because it is Android based. And I love it. So it doesn't have a huge amount of memory. I only use it for Pattern Keeper, and I put, I'm really only doing my full coverage on there right now. Maybe in the future, when I start to get other patterns that are large and more complicated, but not necessarily full coverage, I would consider using it. For now, I'm still using paper copies for all of those. but I'm really liking it. And I think it's the reason why it's increased the speed of my stitching is the visual. For anyone who works on full coverage on a paper pattern, you know, as good as you think you are about, you pull out a color and you're working on it and finding all the symbols in whatever area you're stitching on, inevitably there's that one stitch that you miss. And you know, you get done on a page in a pattern and all of a sudden you've got 80 symbols that you missed, like that color, and you're like, yeah, I'll come back to it. And then you're pulling out 80 colors to try and fix those. It just takes time to find a color, thread your needle, stitch it, tie it off, and go on to the next one. This really helps to reduce that. So I'm really loving Pattern Keeper. And I, the 30-day trial. I mean, I basically knew I was going to buy it if I invested in the tablet. Why not? But I did the 30-day trial. Everything was great, so I just went ahead and purchased it. And literally, it is only Pattern Keeper on there. I, got the thing. I, hooked it up to my Wi-Fi. I immediately put on some antivirus software. We have an antivirus software that we use on all of our devices. Put that on there, and then I went to Pattern Keeper. And I don't do email or Facebook or anything else on there. I use my Microsoft Pro for that. I'm really enjoying using it. There's occasional glitches. For example, and I don't know why, occasionally you'll say you mark something off and then it doesn't look like you've marked it off. But then all I do is move the, there's a function where you can move around the pattern, and I do that, and then the stitches appear as marked. I also, occasionally I don't have a cover for my tablet right now. I need to get one. And occasionally when I'm handling it, my thumb might go someplace, and that happens to be the color that's highlighted. So now it thinks that it's stitched, and I didn't realize my thumb went there. Usually I can sort of figure out that's happened and go and just, there's a function now where you can sort of you can frog stitches on Pattern Keeper. And so you can get rid of that. It also counts your stitches for you if you're doing challenges or you just like to keep your own stats. It helps you do that. And I will say I got Pattern Keeper at I think March 4th is when I downloaded the trial and got everything sort of set up. And I had almost 18,000 stitches for the month of March. And that by far is the most stitches I've ever gotten. I retired September last year. I was able to take early retirement, and so consistently I was doing 12 or 13,000 stitches a month after that. And just to have such a huge leap in my stitches when my life hasn't changed drastically, I think just shows how much more you can get done with Pattern Keeper, and I'm greatly enjoying it. So if you're on the fence about getting it, I would suggest get it and try it. Now obviously you need to have the right device for it. I'm not an IT expert. I understand if you don't have an Android device, there is a way to do it through something called BlueStacks. I'm not an expert on that, and that's part of the reason why I didn't want to get Pattern Keeper and be frustrated by the technology. I just wanted to be able to use it. And by having a Samsung tablet, that resolved it. I know a lot of people buy Amazon Fires, and that seems to work as well for them. But you do you. I'm just giving you what's worked for me, and it really has helped my stitching. I have a teeny bit of haul to show you. So the first thing I want to show you, and I've already lost part, here we go. So Colleen, Rebel Stitcher on YouTube and on Instagram, I think she may have changed it. It's Rebel Stitcher Designs. She also goes by Moon Pie Fry. She's a really good stitcher, but she also makes needle minders, and she doesn't have a shop. She doesn't do it through Etsy. Basically, you do it through Instagram, and you tell her what you want, and she'll send you an invoice through PayPal. So I wanted, she had a grab bag where you would get 5 needle minders for $10. So I said, I'm just going to see what's in the grab bag. $10 isn't that much money, and I like using needle minders. So these are the ones I got. So this is the screen. Oops. This is a decorated Christmas cookie, like a tree. I'm not the most hip person when it comes to pop culture, so I don't know exactly what this is. I'll bring it up a little bit closer. It looks to me like a banana or a corn cob with a kitty head sticking out, so if someone knows what that is, let me know. And then we have these two here as well. And this one is clearly a painting of some sort. I don't know if it's based on a Klimt painting or something else, but it's really pretty. And this one, again, various figures, not really sure what they are. The blue one looks like a Smurf to me. I don't know if this is just a collage of characters or something else, but anyhow, I really like them. So thank you for Colleen for offering those to us at a really great price. I really appreciate it. I also, for the Fabric of the Month Club, I do several, and I just got into color and cotton, so I'm very excited about that. But this one is from Stitch Me. So this is, it's a 32 count even weave, or Lagana, in this color. What should you call it? Excuse me for 1 second while I put on my glasses. Oh, yeah, so it's an interesting color. It's called Through the Stones. It's not really showing up. It's looking a little bit minty green there. It's much more of a sort of sage green. That's what I would call it. But it's a really pretty color. Sort of a neutral, but not sort of the tan beige neutral. But it's a really, really lovely fabric with very light modeling. So thank you to Brandy at Stitch Me for sending me that. And the last thing I purchased, I needed to get from, I have a sampler that's kitted up and has a few hundred stitches on it, but I decided to use the silks, and so it's a Vera Soie d'Alger silks, and I was missing, I spent a while kitting it up because I was trying to kit it up during the pandemic, and so between money, the cost, and just the availability of items, I got almost everything, I think, by the end of 2020, and the only item I had left that I need to get was one skein of floss. And so the only places I've seen that sell a Vera Soie d'Alger are 123 Stitch and Fire Poppies. So I placed an order with Fire Poppies. If anyone knows of another source, let me know. I'm very happy with both 123 Stitch and Fire Poppies, but if they're ever out again, it's good to know that there are other sources where I can source fibers. But I couldn't, obviously, and I got some other thread for projects as well, but I always like to throw a chart in. So this was an expo release from the Blue Flower. This is the Gentle Rain. I love almost everything that Janine from the Blue Flower does. So this will be a great start for me in 2022 when I can start things again. A lot of great things about this pattern. One of the things I really like is the bird bath, and don't think you can really see it so much on there, but it, like as many bird baths, there are stone images on there and carvings, and it's just really, really pretty. It doesn't really show up so much in my camera. It's a little bit hard to see, but I really love this pattern. So I will be looking forward to stitching on it, along with another Blue Flower that I already have kitted up from 2019, in fact, and I just haven't had a chance to start it yet. So that is all for the stitching. A little bit about what I'm reading and watching. So I actually, through audiobook, I listened to One by One by Ruth Ware. It's sort of a murder mystery suspense type novel. Basically a British startup, the ownership, basically they all go to a ski chalet in France, and they're having a conversation about whether or not they should sell the shares in their company to go public, and half of them think it's a great idea and the other half think it's a horrible idea. Do you cash out or not? I think it's the age-old question in many businesses. And so, but while they're at this ski chalet, someone disappears, and then there's an avalanche, and so now they're sort of locked into this ski chalet, and one by one, a couple others are killed, one disappears, and it's your standard murder mystery of whodunit. It's done from the point of view of two of the women in the story. If I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't do it on audiobook, because I think the visual, the very beginning especially, they're like reading off websites, and then every time it flips between the two characters, it sort of talks about, like gives basic information about them. Like basically there's some sort of, this is a music service and it's how many followers do they have and all of this, and it's just every time, and so it got a bit tedious after a while to listen to it. Overall, the first half of it, I thought it was great. About 2/3 the way through, you find out who's done it, and then it just keeps going. And I got frustrated towards the end. Okay, now I know who did it. I don't need the long, drawn out. Whatever happens, happens. I don't want to give away who did it, but it just sort of gets dragged on a little bit too long for the story. So again, it was fun. I listened to it on my morning walk, so it's not particularly difficult. But I do, if you're just looking for something that sort of, if you like suspense, read it. But have a way that you can do it, rather quickly at certain points, because it did drag on a little bit for me. Another book I read was Deficiency by S.C. Eston, I believe is his name. This was definitely you get what you pay for, because it was a free book that I got through a Goodreads giveaway, and it was not very good. So I do not recommend that one. But the last book I read, which I do highly recommend, is Queenie by Candace Katie Williams, I believe is her name. I'm not sure if I'm saying if it's Katie or Caddy. I don't know how she says that part, Caty. Really, really good book. It came out in 2019, but I think it takes place probably a couple years before that. And it's basically about a Jamaican British woman. So she was born in the UK. She grew up there. She lived in Brixton, but she is the first person in her family to go to college. But she had a difficult childhood. And the first half of the book, you can see her, it starts off with her that she's on a break from her white boyfriend. And that sort of has devastated her, and she starts engaging in some very questionable behavior, and you start reading it going, oh honey, get your act together. I mean, she's not able, she's got a good job, maybe not the best pay, but it's really interesting, and she sort of is unable to work, and she's picking up guys or and just left, right, and center, and they're mistreating her, and she doesn't seem to care. But then about halfway through the book, there's sort of a shift, and you get more of her backstory, and she does manage to sort of pull herself out of just her really poor behavior. And it was really, really well written, and it is in the UK. It does reference the Black Lives Movement, and the book, the reason why I think it takes place a couple years earlier is that it references the death of Leandro Castillo, who was a black man who was shot by a white police officer during a traffic stop, when the police officer asked him if he had a gun. Or I don't know if he was even asked, but he said that he had a gun in the trunk of his car, and even though he had his hands on the steering wheel, he still was shot, because the officer said that he, by saying he had a gun, it was very aggressive. And I have strong opinions on what happened, because after the trial where the white officer was exonerated and found not guilty, there was a video came out afterwards, and that makes me wonder how that jury could have found him not guilty. I can understand a hung jury, but for 12 people to have seen that video and said this cop did everything right, it really is disturbing. But nonetheless, that's sort of my opinion on something. I'll move away from that. But nonetheless, just about a black woman living in the UK, navigating a world full of people that feel entitled. She really, I think the author did a great job of really getting you to care for the lead character, who's named Queenie, and really help you understand her point of view. And there was one really, really great quote, and unfortunately it was a library book, so I've given it back, but there was one point where after she sort of gets back on the dating scene, and she says she's going to have better judgment in men. She meets a guy online and thinks he's great, and they go out. He's kind of a jerk, and she really wants to leave. He has said something that, I don't remember what he said, but they end up having a 2-hour conversation. And at the end of it, he sort of teasingly says, well, this wasn't, he's like, this was an argument for the sake of an argument. I was just playing devil's advocate. I agree with you. And she said, the problem with playing the devil's advocate is that this doesn't mean anything to you, but I have to live this every single day. And so I can't just have a conversation about it. It's said much more eloquently in the book, but I think that is very true. People who, you can have a passionate argument and things matter to you, but if you want to have someone who is living with some of the difficulties that, you know, in our societies, whether it's the United States or in the United Kingdom or elsewhere, and you are not part of that. You don't understand. It's not something that you can just throw off whenever you want. You are living it and breathing it. Even if you can have a calm conversation about it, you have experienced it, and you can be passionate about it. You can't just walk away from it. You can't. It's just something that is a part of who you are. And so I thought that was, I really, really enjoyed the book, and I highly recommend it. Again, the first half of it, I was a little bit questioning it, because it's, when you're watching someone spiral out of control, the character is in her mid-20s, which is a lot younger than me. You start to wonder, youth. But the author does a really great job of bringing it around. And towards the end of the book, I really, really liked her. So that's what I've been reading. What I've been watching, I have been watching baseball. My husband and I, a few weeks ago, we decided that we would get, whatever it's, Major League Baseball. I don't know if it's extra bases, whatever the package is called. I lived in the Washington, D.C. area for quite a few years, and even when I wasn't living there, it was sort of my touchstone whenever I would go to Washington frequently. We were in Washington in 2005 when the Washington Nationals had their first game. We did not go to the first game, but we went very early on. And in fact, when the mascot Screech, who's a baby eagle, was born, we went to that game. And we, whenever we're in the DC area, if it's baseball season, we always try and go catch a game. And the current park, Nationals Park, which opened, I don't remember, maybe even a decade ago now, but it's a really lovely park, and we really enjoy going to baseball games. Now that we're living in Florida and travel really isn't an option, we're probably not going to go see our beloved Nationals anytime soon. So we decided to get this, the Nationals, and promptly had a lot of positive, well, they had at least one or two people who tested positive for COVID, and then because of the number of people who were in contact with them, they had to postpone probably their first 5 or 6 games. They then played their first game on Tuesday and won that one. It was beautiful, and then they lost the next 2. So that season has gone up and down. They are down about 10 players right now, either because they tested positive for COVID, or because of quarantine restrictions. They can't join the team. So, but we're looking forward to watching that, and I'm also really happy that we have supported MLB. We made this decision weeks ago, but what's happening in Georgia right now with the attempt to suppress voters, and the decision by Major League Baseball to move their the All-Star game away from Atlanta to another site yet to be determined, because they don't want to put extra revenue into a state that is looking to suppress the rights of so many people. So I applaud Major League Baseball, and I'm happy to support them. But again, the decision was not at all political. It was purely because we wanted to watch baseball. Anyhow, I think that is all I have for today. I've been going on for almost an hour. So thank you to everyone for watching. If you liked what you've seen and you haven't done so, please subscribe. And I love to get your comments. I love responding. So I look forward to seeing you again in probably about 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.